everyone, and welcome to today's session, Women in Digital Forensics, Leadership, Growth, and Future Trends. I am Kainaz Baria, your host, and I'm thrilled to have you to join us today, especially as we're celebrating Women in Cyber Talks Month. Before we get started, we would like to go over a few house rules. For our attendees, the session will be in listen-only mode and will last for an hour. 15 minutes will be dedicated to question and answers. Now let's hear directly from our speaker, Amber Schroader, as she introduces herself and shares insights on women in digital forensics, leadership, growth, and future trends. Over to you, Amber.
Thank you very much. So I'm excited to be here today, especially in March where we're celebrating women in cyber in general. I was asked to talk in the digital forensics division of those talks because I have been in this field for over 30 years. I've spent my career doing digital forensics. I'm still an active investigator as well as running one of the digital forensic technology companies. And it has really been the core of what my goals and objectives have been for a very long time. So I'm going to go through a couple different things in this series. I'm going to talk about some of what my history is and how I got to where I am today, as well as really how you can do changes or adjustments in maybe your path that will hopefully get you to your end goals sooner, and some of those learning options that you might have. I think the big thing to think of in the month of March as we get to celebrate women in careers is, as I was talking to someone, they said, I don't think that there's necessarily a skills gap that is the problem for women, but it's more a perception gap. And I think that's really one of the things I want to emphasize, that it absolutely is the goal of the presentation is to adjust and change your perception, your perspective of where you might be in your career and maybe where you're going and what you can maybe adjust. And for those of you, it doesn't matter your gender, it's all about that support at the end of the day as we go to those goals. So where did it all start for me? So back in 1980 is where it all started, where I had that first moment where I actually was watching Wonder Woman on TV, and it just clicked for me. I want to be this person. I want to be a superhero. I know we all have those things when we're growing up where people say, what do you want to be when you grow up? And we write in there, I want to be president, or I want to, be a superhero. I want to be a firefighter, whatever it may be. For me, it was Wonder Woman. And the reason that I wanted to be Wonder Woman actually had to do with her theme song. So this is the Wonder Woman theme song. So in your satin tights, fighting for your rights, all the world's waiting for you and the power you possess. Now the world is ready for you and the wonders you can do. But it was this last one that really got me, which was change their minds and change the world. And that's really what my objective here today is, just to really have that perception of changing your mind and maybe changing the world with that change in your mind. It was the fight for justice that really attracted me into digital forensics, because it is the only evidence that is out there that is really black and white when you start looking at an investigation. When you look at blood evidence, DNA evidence, all of those other types of evidence that can be brought into a case, there's a lot of perspective, there's a lot of opinion about it. But when it comes to digital evidence in digital forensics, it's really a 1 or a 0. And that's one of the reasons I really liked the space, is somewhere that I felt I could make an impact on what justice was for a variety of different people out there. So what is digital forensics as a whole? And it kind of matches up with the EC Council Essential Series that you just saw broadcast, where it does all the learning in all these different areas. We kind of have the same thing when we kind of look at this holistic picture of it. We have cyber, we have InfoSec, we have incident response, we have e-discovery, and within this larger scope, we of course have our small little section that is digital forensics. And it is one of the smaller sections when you look at the overall kind of scope of cyber in general, but we're kind of that section that is underlying to so many of the others. So in order to do cyber, you're going to have just a little bit of digital forensics sprinkles in there to be able to find the appropriate evidence of maybe something that happened. Same with an incident. If I'm investigating an incident, I'm going to recover from that incident, and then I'm going to have to do forensics to go and backtrack through the information to figure out how that actually occurred. And that's one of the reasons that I really like it as a field, is that it is an underpinning of all these other areas. And it's really kind of the science of those areas, because we process through exact processes and steps when we're doing digital forensics. It really becomes some of that backbone pieces for all these other areas. So what do you do if you want to enter into the field of digital forensics? You might not have ever heard of it. This might be your first exposure to it. And now you're like, okay, this sounds interesting to me. So here's the reasons I like it. I like the variety. So I am neurotypical. So I am ADD. I have OCD. I have dyslexia. I'm going to talk about that in a minute. All of those things that make my mind work and function are one of the reasons I really like the space, is because I'm never doing the same thing every day. I might be investigating working with computers, so I'm going through a file system associated with Windows, Linux, or Mac. And then the next day I might be working on Android and Apple devices, so working on iOS and figuring out different apps and what they're doing with the device. The next day it might be about cloud storage or working with collecting data out of Teams or Discord or Slack. And then I might move into smart devices that you might see in the background of my camera here, where I'm investigating something like a toy or a smartwatch or a smart speaker or virtual reality. I have done every single one of those, and I get to switch through those every day, which is fantastic for a mind like mine, where I always joke with it that it has so many different threads going at one time that it can get really bored really quick. So if I had to show up and do the exact same thing every day, I probably wouldn't love it as much as I do love digital forensics, where I get that variety to it. The other side of it is I actually like the science side of it. So for me, who has that OCD component in my brain, being able to do set direct steps in order to process information and then finding different hypotheses to go through and say, how would I collect off of an Oculus device? And really going through and researching that to figure out a proper collection methodology to it, and then retesting it, writing all of that up. I find that part of it very fascinating. So it's a good fit for someone like me. It's not really necessarily an artistic field, but it is still a very creative field, because there are so many different data devices that have information on them. You kind of have to approach each one of them uniquely. The other side of it is that there's lots of different jobs in the field. And I say that because everyone always just says, oh, I'm going to be a digital forensic examiner. But there's a lot of different types of digital forensic examiners. There's public sector and private sector examiners. So you might be working with a law enforcement agency or a government agency on the public sector side. And on the private sector side, you could be working for a corporation as part of the incident response team. You could be working with the legal attaché, saying that you're going to do the collections associated with the e-discovery, but you're going to do them forensically. You might be working with even an HR department. It's a lot of different areas that you get to have that touch to data, because as I mentioned, we're kind of one of those cornerstones that you need when it comes to proving facts within a case, whatever the case may be. And because of that, you get a lot of choices out there. So here's one of the reasons I made my choices. So dyslexia is something that I never got diagnosed when I was a kid, and I think it's just because they didn't diagnose things like that when I was a kid. But as I started realizing as I got older, and I was teaching a class and I was writing on a whiteboard, and I wrote out this whole section of things, and I'm like, this is what we're talking about. And everyone in the class looked back at me and said, we have no idea what that says. And I was like, what do you mean? And I went back and I looked at it and I read my writing, and I write in all caps. So I'm like, okay, it's not my handwriting. I said, it makes sense to me. And they said, it's all jumbled up. And it was actually that big epiphany moment that I realized that that probably was that dyslexia side. I have a tendency to transpose the middle part of words when I output them in writing. I'll reverse numbers around, all of those different things. But I realized that that was one of the unique ways that my brain thought. And because of it, it actually gave me a lot of opportunities in my career. And one of those was when I started out in my career, I started in a company that specialized in cryptography. Cryptography is obviously the whole password breaking. I'm going to genericize it there a little bit by talking about the password recovery aspect of it, where they were generating tools to be able to break different passwords. But because of the way my brain worked, I was able to profile up our different suspects and kind of create different dictionary attacks that might go after different passwords. So I was able to approach the problem a little differently than some of the other people on the team, and I had a lot of success. That success, of course, led to me feeling better about what I was doing, and I was doing fantastic, and I felt great about it. And I said, okay, this is a good fit for me. Then as I explored further into the digital forensics field, I was like, you guys do everything backwards as part of the job. So digital forensics, of course, taking like that incident, as I explained earlier, and then going back and finding the evidence that led to that incident, that is that backward process. And it really clicked for my brain. So I found it to be a wonderful place that I didn't feel like I was failing all the time, as I was feeling that way in school, going, okay, my brain just doesn't work the same way as everyone else, or I would have to read the same book 4 or 5 times before I would be able to have the same comprehension as someone else that was not having this problem. And it was nice to find a field that kind of fit for me. When you're out and you're looking for a career path of where you want to go, or you're making a switch in careers and maybe doing a second career life or a third career life, make sure it's something that actually makes your brain happy. I know that sounds really odd that you don't think about your brain being happy, but when you find that piece that you're like, oh, this just, it fits. It's like finding those perfect pair of jeans or whatever it may be. It just fits and it's awesome. And it can make that world a much better place for you to exist in. So after I went through and did all that cryptography work as I was younger in the career, I worked my way up within that organization. And eventually we did end up parting ways. And that was where I said, okay, I need to evaluate my skills, make sure I'm having the right skills to move forward. So I break it down into soft and hard skills. I think that's something that we have to do every day of our lives, is as we kind of get together, we say, okay, what am I going to accomplish today? I make sure I look at both my soft accomplishments and my hard accomplishments. As far as the soft skills end up being more of those mental exercises. So really pushing my curiosity. I know that sounds funny, but I exercise my curiosity with some of the books I read. I recognize that I need to work on some problem skills. Believe it or not, I do old school puzzles to make sure that I'm still able to keep those parts of my brain active, and I exercise those as much as I exercise my body. I have the ability to pivot. And one of that is just making sure it's like, oh, we're talking about this, now we're going over here and we're doing this. So whatever type of problem solving, I work on those skills within my soft skills. On my communication side, this is where I work at this with the other people around me, whether it's my staff I'm working with or it's other people within the community. I really work on my written skills and my verbal skills to make sure I'm presenting in webinars like this, or I'm writing up blogs or white papers, whatever it may be. I'm making sure I'm always working to refine those particular skills, because if I don't use them, they're going to go away. It's that simple. And that's the side of soft skills that I don't think it's addressed very often, is that you have to use them to make sure they stay sharp. On the hard skills, it's more on the side where I might take classes with EC Council. I might take a book and read through a book and do some of the lab exercises in the book. That's where I'm working on my overall computer knowledge, or my knowledge of devices or IoT, and really getting into the physical tech and breaking that down and doing those associated trainings. Those are big pushes that I'm doing all the time, whether it's formal courses that I'm taking or research projects that I put together and write that hypothesis on, because again, I'm working in a science, and then going through and making that process possible. There is a lot of failures when it comes to actually practicing those hypotheses, I guess, of capturing different data points from a variety of different devices. And so it's that repetition of finding the right way, doing a little tweak to the formula until I get the results that I'm looking for. When you're doing some of those hard skills, one of the important aspects of digital forensics that's a little different than some of the other fields is that it is a heavy certification industry, because we have to be certified in the tools that we're using in order to make sure that we know more than the layperson, which is what qualifies us as an expert. So those certifications should be an important aspect for you to make sure you're getting those from different vendors with the tools you might be using, as well as organizations that you might be associated with, like the Certified Ethical Hacker, or the Certified Hacking Forensic Investigator, I think is the one that EC Council does. It's a lot of acronyms for someone dyslexic, so those are tough for me. But those are great certifications that are going to improve your path in order to be active in the field of digital forensics. So on our female aspect, how do we stand out? And this is a hard one, and I say it's a hard one more in the fact that with all these other tidbits about myself and my neurodivergence, I'm also naturally very shy. So I'm talking to a camera, so that makes it a little easier, but I really have to psych myself up when I talk to a live audience, or heaven forbid, I have to go in and do networking. I suck at networking because I'm naturally a very shy person. So I've had to try to create mantras or mental things to push myself forward to try to be better at that. So one of the things that I've always said is to be assertive, but not aggressive. I think there's a fine line between these two things, and it's very unfortunate that us as females, it gets perceived very differently. So make sure you're assertive, stand up for yourself, stand up for what you know is the information is correct, or what your perspective or point of view is. Absolutely be assertive, say that this is what it is. I know I'm right, and own that you're right. Speak up and share those thoughts. I know we all get very intimidated. We're going to end the session and they're going to ask for questions, and everyone's going to be like, I don't want to ask a question. What will they say if the question is dumb? There are no dumb questions. Go ahead and share them. The only way we're all going to get better is from learning from one another. So sharing your thoughts is critical to get them out there. The other side of it is I think we have a problem sharing our accomplishments. I have a really hard time being like, oh, I did this great, amazing thing. Let me share this out there. And I have the same problem even when it comes to my own company. It's like, oh, we worked on this amazing case. I'm like, oh, but I'm happy we did the great work. I don't necessarily want to shout it from the mountaintops, so to speak. But go ahead and take the time to share your accomplishments. I think that is the aspect of social media that is really positive for all of us, is that we have a platform that we can share those accomplishments even when we're shy. It's not a problem to do a quick post that says, hey, I just completed this certification, or I just finished this research. Let me share what I learned in my research. But go ahead and shout it out at the top of your voice and share it in your social media. That's what it's for. And that's your opportunity to have that spotlight on you. And the last one, I know it sounds a little weird to say own yourself, but this one took the longest. At the point I am now, I'm 30 plus years into this career and working within this field. And I've finally gotten to the point that I'm comfortable with owning who I am, which means I might show up at a conference and you know what? I like to wear tennis shoes. I'm wearing, some custom chucks that I have, or I am wearing a funny t-shirt because that's part of who I am. But at the other side of it is that I'm not accepting to just be second, or to be like, oh no, you go ahead of me, it's okay. It's like, nope, I'm a qualified person in this field. I've worked really hard throughout my entire career to get to where I am. I know what my information is. I've studied, I've retained my information, and I am qualified. And I get to own that as part of who I am. So strive for that, to be able to take that and share that with others. So digital forensics is a terribly deep field. I know it feels like I'm diverging a little bit, but I say that because I think this is where a lot of people think, oh, I'm going to get the basics of this, or this is all I'm going to do. There is so much information we don't know over any of these items out here, from smartphones to data correlation to computers to cloud to IoT, whatever it may be. It's such a deep field, and there is new areas that are coming out that we've never looked at before every day. Out of all the fields out there, I know we get a lot of attacks when we're looking at like malware or any of the different malicious things that can happen in the world of cyber. I'll look at it that way. But when it comes to actually taking the data apart and understanding it, there's truly like new things discovered every day. And it's discovered by regular people in the field. There's not one large entity that's like just sharing all of their research, not even on the commercial side. So know it's a deep field and there are opportunities no matter which area you find that is interesting. And that's the other side of it is digital forensics in general, that's the overall scope of the space, but it's also started to create a lot of specialties. So someone might be considered just someone who specializes in Mac, or just someone who specializes in smartphones or cloud data, or scripting, or whatever it may be. But know that there is a place within the field if you have that built-in curiosity that could be a good fit for you. And there's always new data being discovered and explored every day, which kind of leads to the other area. So I am sure you have all heard the whole imposter syndrome. And I think this is one of the things that hurts us more than anything else, is that we as a general group in the field of digital forensics have a hard time just accepting the fact that, wait, we've hit that level of accomplishment, we know what we know, and we're okay with shouting it out. The problem we have is that we feel like an imposter because someone else is always discovering something new. Remember, the thing that is making you feel like an imposter is because it has such a depth to it. It's not because you don't know what you know, it's just because it's such a deep field. So balance that out with you, with your perspective and your goals with it, where you're trying to constantly learn, but yet you're still owning what you've already learned. And that's that balance to avoid the typical imposter syndrome that has now become so common for everyone. So positioning yourself strategically. So the first question I always get out of sessions like this is, I have graduated, I have my degree, I have my certifications. How do I get a job in this field? And it's a tough one because a lot of the jobs in digital forensics are expecting you to have experience, and you're like, how can I get experience if you won't hire me? It's like one begets the other, so it's kind of a chicken and the egg thing. So this is one of the ways that I recommend that you can kind of go out and do that. Is I'm going to focus a little bit on how you can actually get employed in this field. So the first one is, and this is true for everything, is ensure your resume is targeted to the job. So everyone comes out and they say, hey, will you review my resume? And I get this resume, it has multiple pages of accomplishments, and I'm like, but this means that you are skilled in like 100 different things, but which ones are you a master of? And that's where you have to really write the resume focused to it. So if I were going out and I were looking for a job, and I did this with my kids as they were looking for different jobs, I said, let's write your resume specific to what this position is about. That way you're emphasizing the skills that match what they're looking to hire. And I think that's an important aspect, where instead of approaching your resume as a one draft and you're done, make sure it's an individualized draft for every job posting that you're doing. Make sure you mix up your skills with your accomplishments again, and that's owning those accomplishments and being open to sharing those with others. That's one of those hard things that we have, especially if you're on the shy side like myself, that says, oh, I have these great skills. But if you emphasize the accomplishments instead of just saying, oh, I have these skills, emphasize the things that you've been successful with. So if you've done a lot of research and then you presented on that topic at a conference, that is an accomplishment that is worthy of your resume to put on there and make sure that people know this is something you've done well. Then you have to look at the certifications you have. There's a lot of them. There's a lot of them. And because of that, you've got to make sure you match up with the certifications that that job has an expectation of. There are some general ones in the industry that people are expecting to have as kind of your baseline, your foundation. Then you start getting these specialty ones. Make sure you're pursuing the ones that match what your end career goal is, and that again, those are put on your resume, and mention what you felt was the valuable aspects that you learned in that certification and why you felt that it enhanced what your career goal is. Don't just be like, I got this checkbox. Talk about it. Be willing to share what your process was with it. The last one is the toughest one, which is showing that you can grow with your position. So in digital forensics, you're dealing a lot with devices, computers, and different things like that, but you also are dealing with a lot of people. And I think some of those soft skills on the management side and talking with others, like I mentioned, communication, written skills, verbal skills, that is all part of the process that also has to be put on your resumes to make it so you are strategically approaching the position, because someone physical, a real person, is behind all that data. And you've got to be able to interact with potentially those people or the people that are investigating that individual. So what if you're lacking the experience? You can't find the right location. So here are some of the real things out there. Digital forensics is typically a very in-person job. And it has to kind of be elementary to you to think of that, because as you physically deal with different devices or computers or IoT or whatever it may be, most of the time they're expecting you to be in a physical lab at a specific location. If you're able to do remote work with it, that type of remote work is going to be very focused on analytics. So make sure that you have those two things balanced out within your resume or approach to the job. You might have to move to a different location that matches where that job opportunity exists, because it's not necessarily going to exist in a very random rural location. You might have to go to a city which is more likely to have a different a lab location. Make sure that you go through and you get some experience. I know you're like, wait, no one hires me, then how can I get experience? This is where it's time to volunteer. So I have a passion for animals. You might see some dog stuff behind me in my camera. And so I make sure I volunteer with a lot of animal rescue groups. It seems that they have a lack of cyber perspective, so to speak, in how they've set up their organizations. And so that's part of what I offer to them as a service or a volunteer for them. This is here, let me help you with these. I have these skills, I can help you in this organization. And I've done anything from security services to forensics for them, because they had someone leave the organization and take data, or they had some data destruction, whatever it may be. But there is a lot of different groups out there that are nonprofits that don't have a full cyber or digital forensic staff with them. Take your opportunities to find them and see how you can help fix some of the problems that they might have. That's going to give you experience both on the soft skill sides with writing, maybe talking with different people, and on the hard skill side, probably putting together a plan, actually doing a processing of information, whatever it may be. But that's a great way to get started that still allows you to add some experience onto that resume. Try out to start with some of the smaller companies out there. You might not get your optimal pay you want in a smaller company, but you get that opportunity cost with it. That says, hey, I am going to get that first initial experience. I might be able to explore different certifications while I'm with this smaller company, and you might be able to make larger impact at a smaller company than at a larger one. So don't just discount an opportunity because it's maybe not the perfect one that you were looking for. There's a lot of choices out there, and there's a lot of ways to approach the problem. So make sure that you're looking for different opportunities in different organizations. And yes, some of them might be volunteer for a short period of time, and it's not going to be a full-time thing. It's going to be a couple hours a week or a month, depending what you're doing with them. But that's just going to build up that resume to get you to that end goal job that you're looking for. All right, so how do we improve our portfolios? So like I mentioned, your certifications actually show what you learned. And I know that seems very elementary, but just because an organization is aware of a certification out there, that doesn't mean that they understand the skills that you got while doing that certification. So make sure that those are parts of your resume and part of what you're putting out there is, I learned how to do X, I'm proficient in this, whatever it may be. You might have to define it for them because they might have an old certification as part of their job requirements, but there's a new one that's launched and they just haven't updated. So make sure that you're very specific on what you've learned. I always like to as well kind of explore the opportunities to kind of go that extra mile. So I designed a lab before I actually worked in a lab, and it's because I had all the training, I did different certifications, and as part of that I said, okay, well now I understand what should be in a lab. Let me put a virtual lab together. Let me figure out all the different components, how I would do the workflow within the lab, what kind of specifications I would have with it, what are my policies and procedures with it, and I put all that together. It was a wonderful exercise for me to understand what goes into a digital forensic lab. And on the other side, it's also an excellent portfolio to offer to someone I might be looking to get employed with that says, hey, this is what my lab design looked like. These are what I learned in doing the process and working through it, that allowed me to make sure that I know I'm going to optimize my time the best I can with on my different projects. Write different posts for your social media, get opportunities to get published in different blogs. I know for my blog that I maintain, Forensic Impact, I always welcome guest bloggers because one, it's sharing with the community out there, and two, it's a great opportunity for them to get published and share their information that they can then put it through on their portfolio, that it was put out in an industry publication in some way. So look for those opportunities. It's not as hard as you think it is. Just ask. A lot of people are more than willing to allow you to have those guest posts, or they're willing to support you with good research that you share out there. And that's the last one I have, which is that participate in the community. Whether it's participating in these EC Council series and kind of virtually working within this group, or participating in some of the social networks out there like LinkedIn, which is for professionals, or within the digital forensic community, we have other groups like Cyber Social Hub. If you're into digital forensics and open source intelligence, you might be working with Osmosis as an organization. All of those things, a lot of them offer free membership to join initially, and that's a great opportunity for meet other professionals in the field and ask for their opinions, get referrals, ask if they need help on projects, whatever it may be out there. But being part of an active community is critical to make sure that you're moving forward on that end path that you're going for. So this is a shout out on probably the thing that I think we as a group in general is probably the worst at, and that is supporting each other. This is a tough one because as a shy person, it's an interesting moment because when I'm in person at a conference and I'm sitting in a networking room, sometimes people will take a shyness as being standoffish, when in fact it's really a person might be shy. So those of you who are extroverted out there, kudos to you, you're blessed, you're lucky. But for those of us who are introverts, we need you to come and talk to us. We need you to break that barrier that says, hi, it's nice to meet you. I'm so-and-so with this organization. This is what I do. What is it that you do? That's your opportunity, kind of push to support other people. And I always make sure that I push that out there because it has been such a difficult journey for me. And it has been harder to be able to be extroverted in any way because that isn't my natural way. So make sure you're looking for those opportunities when you are networking in person or at an in-person event. The other options you have are to volunteer out there. As we want to have strong women and we want to move forward as strong females within a field, make sure you're supporting the young girls. There's some amazing cyber organizations out there that are teaching cyber to girls. Make sure you volunteer. Offer to see how you can support them, because that is what's going to teach them that this is a great field for women and an opportunity that they might not know of had existed. When I was a kid in school, there weren't computer classes, there wasn't an opportunity to have any of these, and my family did not have the funds to go and have the latest computers. I had the same computer from age 12 to age 18. And man, when you lost the floppy disk that had the spell check on it, it was horrible for your papers. So it just didn't have the opportunity. But make sure you go out and reach out. If I had met someone that said, hey, this is a great field for you and the way your brain works, it would have been exciting to know that there was somewhere I could fit, and that would have been great. The other is show your success. The more successful women out there that are seen, the more people will give us the respect that is deserved, and that perception change that we're really pushing for will actually happen, because it definitely is a long journey and it is also long overdue to happen. When you're doing networking as well, remember the online one. Choose to follow some of the wonderful female influencers out there, or women who are aspiring to influence. Like people's posts, make sure you make a comment, give them some support. Encouragement and encouraging words and being kind is always needed. And that is a good opportunity to work that into all of your soft skills every day. So what else do we have moving forward? So this is an interesting one. So as you move forward in a field, you're going to find different opportunities for partnerships and where you're going to go with those different partnerships and relationships. Make sure that you're very cautious about who you decide to tie your reputation to and who you're going to work with. Make sure you're doing due diligence so you don't get taken advantage of at any time. and make sure that you know that you would vet them the same way that you would vet a good friend. And that's kind of a good rule of thumb when you're choosing to work for a company or you're choosing to partner up with an organization, whatever it may be. You only have your reputation, so make sure that you protect it as your valuable asset that you have. The other side of it is on the management side. And I say that because in my entire career, I actually didn't have a single female manager through all of the processes that I worked um, through multiple jobs. And it was an interesting moment because it was harder to kind of move forward because I always got kind of the crappy job and I had to excel at that and then take on another job in order to move forward for it. And it was a struggle. And if we see more women in management, make sure that you're championing the other women that might fall underneath you as subordinates and giving them opportunities, because it is very hard to move up the chain. I wish it wasn't, but the reality is it is. And if we support one another better, we will end up being able to make a better environment for the future. We'll see more female managers, we'll see more opportunities for growth. So what's your future skills? This was an interesting one because I swear every talk I give, I have to talk about AI now. I don't think you can get away from it. It's just what it is. So even in digital investigations, digital forensics, and all the aspects of cyber, I think it's an important thing to understand what AI was. And I swear I was one of the last people to truly decide I was going to drink the Kool-Aid. And it was that moment when I realized I could own a robot. And as a sci-fi geek, I'm like, I want to own a robot. That's pretty cool. But now I look at it and say my soft skills I was working on, my writing skills, my verbal communication skills, the way my brain is thinking, now I'm finding that I am editing those and adjusting those and practicing things like prompt engineering to make sure that I'm capitalizing on the best things I can get from AI that are not only going to help my business, but they're going to help me as an investigator. And it was something that I absolutely had to jump into. It wasn't a, put one toe in the pool and then I would be fine. I jumped into the entire process, and now daily I'm probably running 5 to 6 different AIs. And this is the opportunity time where we haven't had one AI triumph over another AI, so to speak, for you to get a chance to kind of jump in and try all of these different things and gain a new skill. Prompt engineering is actually a skill for your resume, so you can practice at it, you can get certified at it. It came about pretty quickly, and you can learn about how you can use AI to enhance your jobs, because it's not going anywhere. It has hit the bubble and we're going to go that way. So the other side of it is being a good writer. And I know some of you might be going, but wait, AI can write really well. Why do I have to write really well? And I have those moments all the time when I put in copy or I put in paper into AI for editing. When it comes back and it says it better than me, it annoys the crap out of me. I'm like, how is this machine better than what I'm putting into a career of working on writing? But it's forcing me to actually improve as a writer because of it. Now I feel like I'm almost competing with the AI to have less edits done by it as part of that process. But being a good prompt engineer all comes from from being a good writer. You still need to have those skills in order to be able to use the technology and really look at what the future is bringing to you. I think being a good writer is one of those core things that we all need. And the last one, although I've been a little like up and down, this is kind of a different topic for me today, is I really practice presenting. And I say that because I'm going to have to present facts in a case. I'm going to have to present information for sharing within my community. I'm going to have to present research, whatever it may be. I have to know that I can present it both to a virtual audience, to a live audience, whatever it may be, but take those opportunities to present. I think now we have our speaking groups are back. Toastmasters was one from ages ago. They still exist. Take those opportunities to try to speak to a public group. For someone like me who is an introvert, I had to put direct practice into it over and over and over again, thousands of times, in order to get any type of skill or be good at it. So take those opportunities to do that. It doesn't matter what the other people are thinking, just put your best effort forward, and every time you present, you're going to get better. It's inevitable, it's just part of the process. It is much harder. So this has been a much harder presentation versus a technical one where, hey, let's talk about The internal file system of Android, I could talk about that all day long, because this has been a very personal topic for me, because it was always a struggle when I first started in digital forensics. There were very, very few women. There were like 5, so very, very few. It has gotten a lot more, and a lot of that is because females are fantastic investigators. Our natural attention to details is a huge asset to you when it comes to digital forensics. And you need to be able to shout that from the mountaintops, because that is one of the things that makes you unique with your gender. So you can really own that side of it. And I don't think it gets said enough. So I think we're going to go to questions and answers. And I know the anxiety of asking questions, so please don't have that. Ask any question you would like.
Thank you very much, Amber, for delivering such an insightful and informative session. We found the webinar very engaging and hope it was valuable for you as well. So before we begin with the Q&A, I would like to inform all the attendees that this session is in sync with EC Council's Essential Series certification. As the cyber threat landscape evolves, early career cyber professionals need to develop proficiency in multidimensional skills to detect and thwart cyber attacks. The Essential series from EC Council helps you gain a solid foundation across 8 key domains such as ethical hacking, network defense, cloud security, IoT security, threat intelligence, digital forensics, DevSecOps, and security operations. The course offers immersive learning experience through labs, courseware, engaging video materials, capstone project, CTF challenges, and an exam to certify the participants' knowledge. If you're interested to know more, please participate in the poll that is to be conducted now. Let us know your preferred mode of training and we'll reach out to you. So Amber, should we proceed with the question and answers?
Absolutely.
Thank you. So the first one, how has digital forensics helped women to get justice, especially in human trafficking?
That is the tough question. So digital forensics is used often in human trafficking investigations. It's actually a combination of 2 investigative skill sets that come about with human trafficking. It is a combination of OSINT, so open source intelligence, and the collection of evidence associated with it, which would be the digital forensics aspects. There are a lot of anti-human trafficking groups that are doing investigations all the time. A lot of them are actually nonprofits as well, and it's a good opportunity for those of you who are looking to get some experience. They take volunteers to work in their active investigations, so that is a great opportunity for you. So when we start using the digital forensics side in a human trafficking investigation, typically the OSINT side has already uncovered someone who is part of this, and they can collect different evidence pieces. They might be able to collect a smartphone off of the individual who's being trafficked. You might even just be collecting information associated with it out of social media, and you want to keep it as evidence, and so it has to go through that digital forensic process. So it has to go through the validation and the verification of that data, and that all becomes part of the evidence with it. As far as how you can directly do it, it's actually very individual based on each type of investigation you're doing. Human trafficking is a unique area as far as each individual might have a different pattern that was associated with their trafficking, and so you're going to approach it a little differently with each one. It's a little different internationally versus domestically within the US, which is where I am. So it all depends, and that's part of that variety aspect that comes in the field, and it's kind of why you want to have skills within those areas. But I do think having OSINT skills, so the open source intelligence skills, as well as digital forensic skills, are very important if that's an area you want to do investigations in.
Thank you. We'll move on to the next one. What are the requirements for someone who's moving from IT service delivery to specialize digital forensics? Can you suggest certification or required work experience?
So the first thing you have to decide when you're deciding to switch from maybe that InfoSec side of our spectrum into the digital forensics side of it is you need to decide if you're going to go private or public sector. So that's an important aspect to look at, because InfoSec, you're not really looking public-private sector, but digital forensics definitely has those two sides of it. So are you going to be working for law enforcement or as part of a law enforcement unit, or you're going to look on the private sector side? There are some wonderful base certifications that you can look at. EC Council has some. There's some other nonprofits that have some as well. But typically what your base certification is you focus on computer forensics. That's kind of the entry, and it makes sense. Mobile devices haven't been around for the entire time within the field. So start with a computer forensics certification focus. That way you're kind of getting into Windows, you'll get into Mac, you'll get into Linux, but that's kind of your baseline. So that's going to create your base foundation. Then you might want to choose off to a specialty where you're going to look at the mobile forensics side. A lot of mobile forensic investigators started on the computer forensic side and then they decided to specialize. But typically now you want to start with that base understanding of computers, because the mobile devices obviously share data back and forth with computers, etc. So start there and kind of work your way forward. The other side of it is take an opportunity to look at some of the tools and technology that are in the digital forensic space, because each one of those have a different certification with them. And I say that because you cannot do computer forensics, mobile forensics, IoT forensics. You can't do any of it without the specialty tools that exist in this space. So ask for different trials out there from the different tool manufacturers, see if they have like an introductory training option with it, so that you can kind of practice around with the lab until you find out if this is something you really, really want to do. Unfortunately, the other side of digital forensics that I didn't really bring up because it's a little bit of a downer is when you go through and you recover every person's data and it's part of an investigation, just remember that you're not seeing the best side of humanity. Typically, if a suspect is suspected of doing something, then it's usually not a positive thing. So keep that in mind as well, that you have to find that balance to know that you're also going to be able to balance your mental health needs as well as your practical needs associated with the forensics field. Hopefully that answered it.
That's correct. The next one, Amber. When looking to grow in experience and organizations are not willing to have you join them, saying it would be following chain of custody, how do you approach that response?
That's a tough one because I don't agree with their process, but I understand. So for example, if someone were to come to me and ask to be an intern within my organization and they want to work on active cases, I wouldn't allow that. But I would allow them to shadow the investigation. And perhaps that's the change in the approach that says, I know you're not looking to hire right now, but I would love to be able to shadow some of your investigations. I'm happy to sign the appropriate documents that make it so everything is kept under a non-disclosure, so that I can observe to understand the skills that you're employing within your investigations. And sometimes it's something as simple as that. It is a hard field to get entry in because they do expect you to have experience, but at the same time, you can't get experience unless you're hired. And that's where I think working with some of the nonprofits out there, volunteering, since it was brought up earlier with the human trafficking organizations, doing some of that volunteer work to get some of that practical investigation experience can be pivotal to be able to get you into that end job.
Thank you. Are there any organizations or associations you like for digital forensic experts to meet and network?
Yes. So I'm a member of, obviously, LinkedIn is great. There are digital forensic groups on there. They're not as active. Mainly they're just for information sharing, but they're not for networking. I really like Cyber Social Hub. That one's a free organization that you can join, and you can actually talk and network within there. They also run a conference every year in December that is free. So you get to do virtual networking at their conference, which is fantastic. They're one of the sponsors to my conference, which is PFIC, which is also a free virtual conference, so you can network at those. Other organizations, I'm a member and I'm on the board of Osmosis. That's the open source intelligence side. So I look at it as we're really close cousins to one another. And that also allows networking. They have a lot of virtual events in there, but it's really about starting those conversations. So I think those types of groups are fantastic for that. And they're ones I actively participate in as well to make sure that I'm listening and hearing what other people are saying within the field, or if I go ask for advice on a case, because I don't know everything, I'm constantly learning as well, then I will go into those types of organizations. They're very friendly as well, which I know doesn't sound like something that should be impactful, but it really is, because they're open to people who are new to ask questions.
Do you suggest joining the membership of Women in Cybersecurity?
I think it is valuable. I'm a member of some of those as well. I think for me, because of what I'm doing every day, I don't always have a chance to be in the more generalized groups like a Women in Cybersecurity. I'm a member, I believe, of that group, but I have to do so much specialty directly in digital forensics. I will spend most of my time asking questions in the ones that are direct to my space. But for example, I am supporting a women's group on Friday talking about AI on a panel. So I think the women's groups are fantastic because you're going to find women who know where you've been. They've walked in shoes very similar to yours. And that side of it is wonderful because they're very empathetic to where you might be and might have better suggestions for that. I have a very close group of other women that have owned their own business in the investigative field, and I rely on them to be able to bounce ideas off of, and sometimes to just be able to vent, because sometimes that's what it's all about. So I think any type of group that you can feel some camaraderie in is an excellent group to be a member of.
We'll go with the last question for the day. How do you deal with burnout and maintain a healthy mental state as a digital forensic investigator?
You know, it's a very hard thing to do. Burnout comes quickly when you start looking at kind of the worst side of humanity through their evidence. For me, I actually deal with it with dogs. I'm an animal person, and my dogs provide me a lot of peace. I have multiple dogs, and they're kind of my vent at the end of the day, to make sure that I can let some of the bad things I might have had to see in my evidence go at the end of the day. Everyone has something different. I love, it was in the show Sherlock that they described your mind as a mind palace. And I use this multiple times. This is a wonderful analogy and it clicked for me. But I look at my brain and it's all set up in different file boxes, and I make sure I compartmentalize my casework and my job and all these different things so that if I need to, I can then put it off to the side and close out and not have that keep following me through the rest of my day. I make sure I have a hard shut off for when I'm working and when I'm focusing on just living my life. And I think that's an important aspect. I don't think it's critical for everyone to live with their job every minute of every day. I think having set times that your job is your priority in your mind and set times it's not is the way I maintain my mental health. And then having quite a few dogs.
That's great. So thank you to our wonderful speaker, Amber, for answering those questions and for the great presentation and the knowledge that you shared with our global audiences. It was a pleasure to have you with us, and we're looking for more and more sessions with you, Amber.
Wonderful.
Before we conclude, yes, thank you so much. Before we conclude the webinar, Amber, would you like to give a short message to our audiences?
My big message for everyone is remember that it is up to you to change the perception. It is the way you put yourself out there, and make sure you speak loudly. Be assertive, not aggressive, but don't be afraid to share how fantastic and wonderful the skills are that you have.
Thank you so much, Amber. That was great, great thoughts that you've shared with our audiences. Thank you so much, Amber.
Thank you.